So we are showing recording.
Yep.
Okay, so hello everybody. I'm on today and I have Nancy Maia with me. Maya, I am sorry.
That's okay. Good.
But we're going to talk a little bit today about strategies that's going to help you. So Nancy was a personal trainer for 35 years. She owned her own gym for 10 years. And then she actually was a triathlete that made the national team world championship for 2 years. So she has been in the fitness nutrition realm most of her life. And she has some little insights today, but we're going to talk a lot about nutrition and gut health. And Nancy, can you kind of fill us in a little bit? Like, why did you go on this journey of like gut health? And
Thanks, Sherry. It's great to be here. So I think oftentimes we get into teaching and knowledge base because of our own journeys. And I, as a kid, now that I look back, I realized that I really probably never had normal bathroom habits. I remember being constipated as a kid and that kind of thing. I had chronic acne from the time I was really 11 until I was in my late 30s. And by the time I was a highly competitive triathlete, I actually was experiencing very severe chronic diarrhea. And I'm somebody who really always has believed that looking for natural solutions is a better option. And so I actually didn't go to the doctor because I pretty much knew that they would diagnose me probably with, if not diverticulitis, Crohn's or one of those IBS. And they would just give me a medication, and that's not what I wanted to do. So about 20 years ago, I had two separate holistic doctors tell me, I think you need to get off dairy and gluten. And I was like, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do that because I'm going to prove to you that's not the issue. And I got off, my skin cleared up, my diarrhea went away, my hemorrhoids went away. Are we allowed to say things like that? And then after 2 weeks, I reintroduced, and within 3 hours, I was back in the bathroom. So I was like, okay, this is it. And that was about 20 years ago. And so I really had a lot of success with those nutritional changes, those dietary changes for myself. But then what happened was about 10 years ago, my symptomology started to come back, even though I was eating really cleanly. And that was really when I started to dive a little bit deeper and start to learn more about gut health. And, back then we knew a lot. For example, we knew 10 years ago that the majority of our immune system is in the gut, and they were already calling it our second brain. But in the interim, there has been explosive science that has happened in terms of the importance of our microbiome. So that was kind of my journey, and I taught gut health for about 10 years, and it's just with the new emerging science that I've really been able to figure out how to hone specifically to really heal my gut, because the science now is so detailed.
Yeah, and I've been seeing studies come out, and just I feel like it's finally starting to enter in on like the conversations. And I've recognized even in my own practice that you can't just focus, which I knew from my background anyway, that you have to treat the whole person. You can't just, isolate, hey, this is a shoulder and it's this, telescope view. We're one entire whole system, and you have to think of the body that way. Right. And you have to treat it that way. And same way I integrate the nutrition and some of those components in. And I've seen the effects, like the faster effects. So I'm so excited to like dive into this today and hear even more. And even like the microbiome was something that term-wise, I hadn't heard very much. And I feel like honestly, like the last month or two, I'm seeing it more and more. So that's why I'm so excited to like dive into this. And it's,
I'm kind of a science head, so, this is fun. And, when I started teaching gut health about 10 years ago at my gym, and I kind of joke now that, back then when I would tell people that, our gut was our second brain, they would look at me and go, yeah, you got two brains because you got two heads. Like, what? So I agree with you that, just like in the last few months and year, really, every time you turn around, there's an article in a Time, or there's, it's everywhere. So the science is becoming much more available, and we're talking about it, which is super, super exciting to me. So,
and I've been around different people that talk about, so today we're going to dive into some of the basics too, just for everybody listening, so you kind of know what our plan is. So make sure to stay with us so you get a little bit more details of like, what is this even and how it helps you.
right.
But I've heard different people talk about like probiotics and stuff. Now, are all probiotics the same, or like, tell us a little bit about how that integrates in with all of this?
Okay, I will, and that's actually also a piece of my story. So the microbiome, just in terms of kind of a base explanation, is, we've heard the term probiotics, and our microbiome is really just all the bacteria that exists in our gut, good and bad. And we need both good and bad. We just need the right balance. There are over 1 trillion different bacterial entities that reside in our gut. And there's actually more bacterial DNA than human DNA, more bacterial cells than there are human cells. So we have there are people that have these esoteric conversations about, are we the host? We can go down that road another day. But we can think about probiotics, and the really fascinating research that has come out in the last several years is the fact that they now know individual probiotics have specific functions.
Okay.
So just dumping a bunch of probiotics may or may not really address a particular issue. And it's not the probiotic itself, but what happens is that each probiotic eats food. Okay, it's an organism, and it eats food, and those are called prebiotics. Depending on what that probiotic is eating determines what the signaling is, or the chemical outcome, which we think of as signaling. So each probiotic is responsible for producing a chemical that then drives all systems and functions in the body. So by changing our diet and changing what we're feeding those bugs actually can have a serious effect on what they are producing chemically, and then how those signals are sent through the body, which tells our body to be healthy, to not be healthy, to gain weight, to not gain weight, to be, mentally clear or brain fog. All those kinds of things really come down to, the health of our gut, the balance of good and bad bacteria, and then also what we're feeding them determines the outcome. So it's just, it's fascinating. So the answer to your question is no. All probiotics are not the same, and and it can feel a little overwhelming, I think. But one of the things that I discovered, and kind of what I was intimating, was the fact that I tried for 3 years with a local practitioner here to fix my gut issues, because I knew I had gotten to the point where I could only eat 10 foods. I had such severe food allergies, and because they were just getting worse. And I couldn't figure it out. We just couldn't figure it out, because all the probiotic regimens that I tried just made my gut worse. But when I was able to actually find a very specific regimen, I've been able to heal my gut. So, it really does matter.
Okay. And it makes sense, because we're taught, and even like junior high science classes, we're taught on not only our body as humans, but just in general, it wants homeostasis. It wants that overall balanced level of everything. And what we eat and the chemical breakdown of all of that is such a component to that homeostasis. So, it all...
Phone ringing.
Totally fine.
My husband's phone, by the way, who is now home, driving me crazy.
We all have houses full of...
Right.
It's testing relationships time.
Yes. But back to homeostasis. We're all trying to find homeostasis at home. Anyway, and that's absolutely true, So that's one of the, to go back to that idea, balance of good and bad bacteria. That's specifically why when we are given, for example, antibiotics, and they kill everything in the rainforest.
Yeah.
Hidrika! Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
I'm gonna mute myself.
Okay. Go right ahead. So, and I get it with the antibiotics. Whenever my family ends up having to take antibiotics for something, like sometimes it takes almost weeks before that seems to just like ease out of the system. And get back to normal.
So sorry guys, that was the mailman. That's what happens in my house when the mailman comes.
I have been there. My current dog isn't quite as bad, but the dog we had before him, he was, especially in the time that I lived in like apartment or townhouses, it was like anybody approaching was just on guard.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally fine.
So anyway, the other thing that I thought I would kind of tie in here is that, that idea of antibiotics really disrupts our gut health, obviously, but there are a lot of other things that disrupt our gut health. Not only, we kind of touched on nutrition, but also stress. For example, all of us right now are under huge stress, and most of us carry chronic stress loads. So it's really, really important that we are doing things to help our gut health be as good as possible, because by doing that, it actually has a direct impact on our mental wellness, on our ability to deal with stress, which we kind of refer to as stress resilience.
Yeah.
So, taking measures to make sure that you're helping your microbiome in the best ways that you can is really, really important.
And how does that play a role with like mental health as well? Because I know stress and mental health and all of that, it's all connected.
It's all connected. And what we know now is that, for example, we can go back to the idea of the fact that each individual probiotic has very specific functioning. Okay. Well, there are very specific probiotics that have direct impact on our mental wellness. They know there's a strain of probiotic that has direct impact on anger, on anxiety, on fatigue, on brain fog. And so by really helping our gut microbiome to be robust, that's kind of back to that specificity conversation, that we can really help this, what we term the gut-brain axis, to be as healthy as possible. So, and then it's, because it's all connected, gut health affects our mental wellness, the way that we have, deal with stress and that kind of thing, we think is here, but it's also in our gut. Okay. So, and they also know too, that I found this to be super fascinating, that of all of the signaling that goes between the gut and the brain, our two brains, 90% of it, only 10% of it goes from our brain to our gut. 90% of it goes from our gut to our brain.
Wow. So
it's not that, and we've been traditionally treating issues of our brain here, and by really addressing those issues in the gut, people are having phenomenal results with stress resilience and anxiety, and even just like feelings of overwhelm. So
because I know so much of the communication, and I know this just from my educational background. So your nerves is basically, for those that aren't as medically trained, your nerves are basically your message system within your body for everything to talk. So, contracting a muscle, your brain's telling the muscle to contract, but the muscle is also giving feedback back up to the brain. And those different pathways back and forth are the same then in the gut as far as the communication. But that's amazing that there's so much connection from the gut directly up to the brain, because those neurotransmitters, some of us are familiar with endorphins and your serotonin and your dopamine and some of the different terms that we do hear in our common language and articles and stuff as far as serotonin helping people sleep better when you have that restlessness and a lot of those things. So I think that's just amazing I always get amazed at how connected like
Yeah.
everything is. I think
Well,
the
here's
more
another
we
mind
learn,
blower. Yeah, here's another mind blower. Serotonin, dopamine, all of those neurotransmitters, do you know where they're manufactured? Not in your head, in your gut. Yeah.
Okay.
Over 70% of our serotonin is manufactured in the gut.
Okay.
And then because the gut is responsible for the signaling, right? So over 80% of our hormones are actually manufactured in the gut.
Okay.
And then the signaling, right? The other part that's made at other places, the signaling has to help those organs do what they want to do, right? So you start to see how important it is. And I get geek out on this stuff. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, and I just love learning like how it all relates together and how it all ties together. And I feel like the more I learn just physiologically in the body, no matter how many classes I had educationally, it's when you see it with each person, like some things can be super explained, and then some things you're just like, why did that work? Like, I'm not incredibly sure why, but it works. And it's amazing when you start to piece a lot of those things, and when you find like the common threads that maybe haven't always been backed up with the academic papers and things. And then it's funny too when then the academic world catches up even.
Yeah, I know.
But I think it's so fun. I don't know. For me, like food wise and food choices, we always know like, hey, you should pick these foods because they make you healthy or they make you lose weight. But I think so much of society now, like we're looking more beyond that. Like it's not, I want to be skinny. It's, I want to be healthy.
Right.
And I think that's so much of kind of a passion we both share is helping people find
I agree.
those steps to help them be healthy.
Yeah, and I think for me, and I found this to be true in my practice as a personal trainer, because naturally I'm kind of like this, but it's like, what we're really referring to in terms of gut health is really, it's the root of all health and disease. And that's kind of, understanding the root cause, understanding, extrapolating from that, and understanding why you want to eat broccoli because it's the right food for the good probiotics. Why you want to decrease sugar because it's the food for the bad probiotics. When you start to understand that, it becomes less about I can't have what I want and more about I really am making a choice. I'm able to make a choice because I have this information. And I think information is so powerful because it shifts us.
Yeah.
I'm not just eating salads and broccoli to get skinny because my trainer told me to do that. I'm actually eating broccoli because I want my good bacteria to grow because that's how I'm going to lose weight.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And I think that's amazing. And then can you talk just a little bit as far as like chronic stress and how some of that, so I've heard that like chronic stress and that cortisol in your body can be worse than smoking. Is there like a correlation with that has to do with the gut?
Yeah, so really, and they really all are saying that chronic stress is worse for us than smoking. And, when those high levels so cortisol is the hormone that is our stress hormone. So it's supposed to be released when we're running from the bear, right? So fight or flight. But what has happened in our society is that we are really at heightened levels of stress all day long. And so we get into that, we get into that chronic stress. And what that means from a physiological perspective is that those levels of cortisol are elevated for over a long period of time rather than coming up, helping us run from the tiger, right? And coming back down. And there are a variety of effects that cortisol has. So when we're running from the tiger, we're really not supposed to be making a lot of decisions, right? So if we have high levels of cortisol, we got brain fog because we're just supposed to be running, right? It screws up our metabolism. It specifically degrades gut health. So because you're not supposed to be like digesting food and stuff like that, right? So, and then the other thing that we do know is this was really interesting to me is that another little another little specific piece of data, is that we used to call it adrenaline, but there's something called norepinephrine. Okay,
Yep.
and this hormone, norepinephrine, they know now actually is released directly into the gut when we have levels of cortisol.
Yeah.
Or when we're, under stress. Yeah. And what that does, one of the things that happens is that norepinephrine not only helps the bad bacteria grow more, right? But it also makes those bad bacteria more dangerous. And so then we're at higher levels of susceptibility to food poisoning or other things that might somehow get into our bodies. So it's this, it's this really bad cycle that, and I think, when I talk to people about stress, they go, well, I'm not really very stressed out. And the problem is, I think that marker of what is stressed out has really shifted for us. And we think that in order to say that we're stressed out, that we have to be dealing with like a big thing, I don't know, a death in the family, or somebody was in an accident, or, whatever. But we discount the chronic daily things that we're dealing with because we've become so used to them that we don't think they're stressing us out.
Yeah.
But when our bodies are producing so much cortisol, they can't produce serotonin. Yeah, I mean, it's one or the other. So,
right.
And it has, it affects our sleep, it affects our ability to lose weight, and we'll talk about those, in another tomorrow and the next day. But that's why it's worse for us than smoking.
That makes sense. And I know for myself, I experienced some of that chronic fatigue, not really, just the chronic stress levels when my husband was deployed. So he spent all of 2009 in Iraq with the Army. And his job was they would go out and look for the roadside bombs so that they could detonate them safely. But I mean, as a spouse, it's like, so you're going in search of bombs,
right.
That's just a very real stress. And for 12 months, that was his job. So like you get used to that chronic high stress level. And until he had been home for several weeks, and then I finally had like that drop of all the hormone and chemical levels, I didn't realize like how much I was just living at that constant high level because it was just the normal at that point. So it's not like there was every single day something happening, but when, you have that worry or fear about something and you start to just live with that worry or fear, it definitely affects you.
Absolutely. And it's worry and fear about finances. It's worry and fear, like we all got it right now, but it's not just stress that we think about. It's mental stress. It's, being stressed out about your job or expectations or not meeting something or, missing something. It's emotional stress. It's physical stress. Working out is physical stress. And if we're not taking care of our bodies and all we're doing is working out like a mad woman, well, that's also a stress on your body that is not being supported by maybe good nutrition or good sleep or whatever. So it can be more detrimental than it is positive.
Yeah.
All those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's all about balance.
Yeah. I know. So how about let's maybe get together tomorrow and let's talk a little bit more in depth with like the fatigue, because I know like that chronic ongoing fatigue stuff, it's coming in our future. Like we can see it down the pipe. We know we're juggling so many things. And I want to be able to give the best resources of things for people to identify and things, basically like different strategies and ways that the microbiome can affect that, so people can have just more resources even.
Absolutely. And there are easy things that we can do. There are easy things that we can do and implement and make habits. So yeah, that sounds good.
Perfect. So let's get together tomorrow and then we will talk about that and dive into some more strategies.
Sounds great.
Okay.
See you tomorrow.
See ya.